Hi, this is Pris. I've been provoked this week by the Lord to share testimony, and Cindy Pillow had said, Priscilla, you need to do this some time ago, but I really needed to think about it. And now that all of this garbage is being uncovered in our nation, I felt like an emphasis, it was like an emphasis for me from the Lord that you need to get this out there. And so I'm going to share some background first, and so I'm going to break it up so that it isn't too long because my computer broke down and I have to use the phone. So I'm going to start with the background, and then I'll get to the testimony part in probably the next one. I was born in Virginia in 1946, and I was a post, World War II baby. My father was Jonathan Kozar. He flew airplanes in World War II, and he was a son of immigrants from Russia and Czechoslovakia. And my paternal grandmother was Czechoslovakian, and grandfather was a Kozar from Russia. He abandoned my mom, probably due to her own imperfection and unfaithfulness. From what my aunt told me, he went to the Panama Canal Zone to become a cop there after the war, and he didn't return till much later. He married down there, never had kids, I found out much later, and he died back in the USA, all without ever my being able to contact him, because I didn't know where I didn't have any information or anything. And so I was never, able to communicate with him. My mother was the seventh child in a big family of 8 children. My grandfather was a Pentecostal holiness preacher who used to do tent revivals and had a healing gift, but he mixed it with Freemasonry. And there were times after I got saved that I remembered certain things that, aunts and uncles had said, mentioning the Eastern Star and other stuff that made me realize that there was mixture, there. Anyway, my grandparents on my mother's side were of Dutch extraction, and when my mother got pregnant with me, he was a foreigner in their eyes, came from foreign parents, even though they had also come from another, country in their background. They just totally persecuted my mom and didn't give her this kind of support that Christians should give their children. Things were way different back then and kind of Victorian in attitude. And my mother always told me was Jewish, and she had a Jewish book of prayers when she died that I found, and I thought might have come from him. It might not have. Who knows? Her family was rejecting and cruel to her, and she abandoned me after birth because she felt overwhelmed. I don't think could have taken care of me. She was an admitted narcissist later on in life. She told me about it. So she went to Philly with my aunt for a while, and so I was left with my grandmother, and my grandmother took care of me then until I was 1.5, and then my mother returned and ended up marrying a boarder in my grandma's house named Jimmy Lester. So I grew up with his name because she legally changed my name after I was born. And Jimmy's family had incest in it, and my mother, when she died, finally told me some things that I had not known. My mother worked in a polio hospital after I was born, and so I was alone with him in the evening shift when she was working evening shift. And when I was around 3, I think it was, I believe it was that he took me to an OTO meeting ritual. And this was found out through some inner healing that I went through, and God revealed, what was going on. And there were many men there, and the ritual consists of a child being tied up, to a pole, and men abusing that child. There's drinking of blood and all the kind of satanic things that happen. The OTO is an arm of Freemasonry, but more deeply involved in heinous things, I believe. Anyway, in ancient history, because I went to look this up because I couldn't imagine, having been a pediatric nurse either, that, how people could rationalize doing these kinds of things. In ancient history in Greece, men thought that the seminal vesicle was somehow attached in their back to the spinal cord, and that it was actually thought to be a benefit to the child to make them smarter, to be sexually messed with. So I thought, who would have thought this one up? And of course, fallen angels are the likely source. Because of the trauma, I was disassociated and did not remember the incident or others till I pleaded, after getting saved by the Lord Jesus, to know why I was fearful of men. My mother found that my stepfather was abusing me. He also abused her. I realized when I went through some healing, and divorced him. By then, she had a child by him, my half-sister, Melanie. And, yeah, we had gone with the wind names. Anyway, she moved north to Chicago area, and we were in foster care for, part of the time because she had to work. And she wanted to date to try and get a man, so we were left in foster care. And then she found a home where this woman and man in Wheaton, Illinois, she had put an ad in the paper, and my mom delighted and answered it. So again, we were in foster care until I was about 7. In the middle of 2nd grade, she married a man, Jeff Johnson, who was a Catholic and also a Knight of Columbus and a Shriner. So there's the Masonic paradigm again in my life. Again, occult associations with Freemasonry. But from there till 8th grade, there was calm. At least he was a good man in terms of taking care of the family, and they got along, it seemed, till towards the end of the marriage, and then things began to fall apart because she had kept some things from him. And we had gone back to Virginia for a visit with family when I was, just after 8th grade. And my aunt got drunk and called my mom and just spilled the beans to Jeff of some family things that my mother had kept from him. And that disclosure and her lying really, and she was a habitual liar, sadly. So that really caused a rift and caused them to divorce. All this back and forth of, one home to another and all of that had made me feel pretty much like an orphan, useless and worthless, because we ended up back in the foster family after the divorce. And this time the abuse was more severe. I don't know if you know this, but children who've been abused, because of the spirits involved, it provokes other people to abuse them as well. And I learned that in pediatric nursing. I didn't learn that, by my own experience. It was through studying and pediatric nursing that I learned that. So, and looking back, I realized, how much that was a factor in my own life. Anyway, all the back and forth made me feel much like an orphan, and I was reminded of my past often, with Mom calling me a whore when I was in high school, and before I even knew what that really was. In high school, I remember just wanting to finish my education and get out of there, if I could support myself. And she always was saying to me that, you're going to have to take care of yourself because nobody else will. That also implies you're not lovable, you're not someone that's worth taking care of or being with. So there was a whole lot of rejection. If my whole life was pretty much rejection, which is typical for most prophetic people. Anyway, I had to learn to take care of myself, she said. So I spent myself, getting my education, getting myself on firm ground so that I would be able to do that. I spent years looking also for love in all the wrong faces after I got out of school and was working hard on my own. I had come to California for graduate school, which someone advised me to do when I was working at Children's in Chicago. And then after I finished, I went back to Chicago. And while I was in California, I had relationship with my half-sister and my mom again. That was always tumultuous. And then I realized that I really hated my mom, because she abandoned me, because she wasn't there for me and all that sort of thing. I spent time in Chicago then building, career. And I ended up being head of NACOG 1 year for the Illinois nurses. And I worked with the March of Dimes to establish conferences that were for nurses and by nurses and no longer by doctors. I was trained at UCLA to be a change agent. So that was a really amazing time in my life, career-wise. And I was getting older and still had bad choices in terms of picking men to date, and became promiscuous in my searching for love in all the wrong faces. And I got pregnant taking risks, and I'd already rationalized one abortion. But this time I was 38, so I kept my pregnancy, and like my mother I was treated like a leper, even though they wanted me to come home and, help me with taking care of the baby. Even my fellow technicians at Press St. Luke's shunned me. So I had an 11-month pregnancy and a natural delivery of my beautiful baby boy. And the head of OB was my doctor, so he assured that I had an alternative birth, which at the time was rare but important to me. And my older foster sister gave him a bath in the delivery room. It was just a wonderful experience, that they made for me. I was pregnant at Christmas in 1977, and I delivered my son on October 10th, 1978. So I had an 11-month pregnancy, which later I found out was a sign from the Lord of the call in his life. He was 9 pounds and 15 ounces. And my foster family had urged me to come live with them next door so they could help me. And they did financially. Emotionally was a whole nother thing. That was more like a barren time. I'm going to have to cut this short, so I'm going to just stop here, and then I'll pick it up in the next one. God bless you.